It doesn't look as the sort of picture-perfect father, mother, little kid's dog named Spot.
At 56, Jennifer Aniston sat before the cameras, her familiar golden hair catching the soft studio lights. But this was not the playful, laughter-filled Jennifer that the world first fell in love with on Friends. Today, her voice carried a quiet resolve, a vulnerability she rarely showed in public. We've all wondered, why did one of the most celebrated women in Hollywood never grow the family she once dreamed of? Why, despite decades of speculation, did she never become a mother? And now, at this moment, she would finally speak her truth. As she took a deep breath, she looked directly into the lens, as if she were talking to each of us personally. For years, she began, I carried this question in every interview, every magazine cover. When are you going to have kids? A murmur rippled through the press gallery. The words hung in the air, an echo of every reporter's nagging, every fan's curiosity, every headline's demand. But those voices had never heard her real answer, the one that lived behind closed doors, in moments of both hope and heartbreak. Her journey toward understanding her choices began long before she became Rachel Green or a Hollywood A-lister. Growing up in Sherman Oaks, California, Jennifer was the daughter of two actors, exposed early to the glitter of the big screen and the shadows it cast. She saw her parents divorce at age 9 as a personal earthquake, shaking her belief in lifelong love and stable families. In that rupture, she learned independence, a lesson that would become both her shield and her guide. She pursued acting, driven by a thirst to create, to belong, and to prove that she could build something enduring with her own talent and determination. When Friends premiered in 1994, the series captured hearts worldwide. As Rachel Green, Jennifer embodied warmth, humor, and a sense of possibility, a woman who could run away from her wedding and still find her footing in New York. Millions saw themselves in her, the awkward first dates, the fierce loyalty of friends, the dream of making it big against all odds. Yet behind the character's infectious laughter, Jennifer was navigating her own uncertainties about love, family, and self-worth. Late nights on set were followed by quiet hours alone, where she grappled with questions that would only intensify as the world's gaze grew ever more fixed on her life. By 2000, she was seated beside Brad Pitt on the red carpet, the perfect Hollywood couple. Their smiles were genuine, their chemistry was undeniable. Fans swooned at the thought of Rachel Green finding Mr. Perfect in real life. They married that summer on the shores of Malibu, surrounded by flowers, fireworks, and dreams of a future filled with children's laughter. In the glow of that fairy tale wedding, Jennifer imagined motherhood as the next chapter. She saw herself surrounded by little feet and tiny hands, teaching her kids about kindness, laughter, and resilience, the very lessons she had learned through her own struggles. Yet as the seasons changed, so did the narrative of their marriage. Rumors began to swirl during Brad's filming of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, whispers of a deeper connection with his co-star. Jennifer tried to cling to optimism, refusing to let tabloids shape her reality. She continued fertility treatments in private, countless visits to sterile clinics, every procedure a fragile hope of what could be. She endured the pressures of a career still climbing and the relentless intrusion of cameras. Every negative pregnancy test felt like a misstep in a dance she could not master. And when the world saw pictures of Brad alongside Angelina Jolie holding hands and smiling, a world Jennifer had believed in crumbled like a house of cards. In her first public statement after the split, Jennifer spoke softly of respect and deep love that remained. But her eyes betrayed a sorrow no phrase could mask. The press declared her the unhappiest woman in America, a crown she never wanted. Magazines defined her by what she lacked: children, a lasting marriage, the narrative that women must complete a checklist of wife, mom, homemaker. But Jennifer's truth was more complex than any headline. It was a tapestry of ambition and affection, of private losses and personal triumphs. Her value was never measured by family size, and her identity was never bound by societal expectations. In the years that followed, Jennifer retreated from the shout of gossip columns and found solace in her work. She chose roles that mirrored her inner journey, characters who faced heartbreak and found renewal. In The Breakup, she played a woman rediscovering her strength outside a failed relationship. In Cake, she embodied the raw pain of a woman grappling with loss. Through each performance, she gave voice to the silent truths of so many who watched her: daughters of divorce, partners recovering from betrayal, women measuring themselves against relentless standards. Her art became a beacon for those who needed to see resilience in action. Behind the scenes, she also embraced healing. Therapy sessions offered tools to understand why she had carried guilt over choosing career paths when her fertility window narrowed. She learned that mothering need not involve children. She poured love into her friendships, her dogs, her philanthropic efforts. She reconnected with her mother, mending wounds that had festered since childhood. In forgiving herself, she discovered that self-compassion could be a path to freedom, allowing her to define happiness for herself rather than by others' definitions. And so, at this moment, when she finally addressed the world about never becoming a mother, her revelation carried the weight of every lesson she had learned. "I decided years ago," she said, her voice steady, "that I would not let shame dictate my narrative. I tried, yes, I wanted to be a mother. But my body had other plans, and my heart. It found other ways to give and receive love that feel equally precious." Her words were simple, but they rippled through the room like a quiet revolution. She spoke not out of bitterness but from a place of hard-won authenticity. This was her truth. She never had kids because life's story often diverges from our first drafts. She never felt less complete for it, rather she grew more whole. The world watched her transform heartbreak into advocacy, judgment into acceptance. She became a champion for women whose value society tried to confine within narrow parameters. She became a living testament that worth is not a measurement of fertility, but of integrity, compassion, and the courage to live life on one's own terms. She smiled and paused, letting the gravity of her confession settle like sunlight through clouds. At 56, she was no longer the perennially youthful Rachel Green, nor the ingenue thrust into tabloid mazes. This was a woman who had lived through seismic shifts, divorce, heartbreak, global fame, private wounds, and emerged with a quiet wisdom that she was determined to share. And in that choice, she rewrote the script on what it means to be a woman in Hollywood. If you search for Jennifer Aniston online, you'll find an avalanche of clickbait proclaiming fresh rumors, pregnancy speculation, or the next romantic chapter. Yet in every spurious headline lies a question. Why does the world care so deeply about her personal life? The answer traces back to an era when she became America's sweetheart, a beacon of hope for millions who saw their own aspirations in her laugh, her style, her resilience. In the 90s and early 2000s, Jennifer was the girl next door with a glamorous twist, accessibly imperfect, relentlessly ambitious, charmingly vulnerable. When she took the leap from Friends to film, she carried that duality with her. And when life veered off the fairy tale track, we watched, collectively breathless, as she fought to stay afloat. In that first trial of IVF, the clinical world felt as cold and precise as any Hollywood set. Medical terminology replaced lines on a script, and sterile corridors became the new backstage. She recounted the suffocating hope in each cycle, the way optimism lingered like an echo, even when results returned negative. She spoke of the emotional toll, the guilt that crept in when friends announced pregnancies, the loneliness of holiday dinners where every empty chair reminded her of an unrealized future. But she also highlighted a flicker of defiance. Each failed attempt did not reduce her spirit. If anything, she learned that resilience was the very marrow of her being. As she detailed those hidden battles, her tone shifted from plaintive to empowered. "I would lie in bed at night asking myself if my life had value without children," she confessed. "It hurt to see my worth defined by something beyond my control. So I decided to redefine it myself." She began pouring energy into roles that mirrored her internal voyage. In Cake, she adopted a persona so wounded and raw that the boundaries between actress and real woman blurred. The film became a conduit for her pain, her anger, her longing for a rebirth. And critics took note. She was lauded not just for her star power, but for a fearless candor that few leading ladies ever dared show. Transitioning seamlessly from that role, she chose another turn, producing and starring in The Morning Show. There, she inhabited a newsroom veteran grappling with scandal, sexism, and survival, issues eerily parallel to her own experiences under the microscope. She wove her voice into Alex Levy, a character who refused to be silenced, a survivor who held power in her own hands. Through that performance, she extended her reach from on-screen empathy into off-screen advocacy. Her interviews became platforms for broader discourse: ageism in Hollywood, women's autonomy, dismantling archaic measures of success. And as she spoke of these chapters, you could almost hear the collective exhale of an audience yearning for authenticity. We're starved for truths that aren't tailored by PR teams or sculpted by the glare of flashbulbs. When she acknowledged that her younger self might have been terrified of a life without children, she also celebrated the richness that bloomed in other fertile spaces: mentorship, friendships that spanned decades, philanthropic causes that bore her name. In unshackling her identity from motherhood, she illuminated an alternative narrative for countless women questioning whether their dreams must follow a prescribed path. Behind the scenes, her life continued its tapestry of almosts and fresh starts. She found love again, cautiously at first, creating boundaries that honored her heart's fragility. She chose partners who respected her history, supported her healing, and celebrated her identity beyond ratings and box office returns. Though her subsequent relationships did not culminate in a new marriage or children, they offered growth and solace, companionship unmarred by societal expectations. In that space, she reconstructed what partnership meant for her, a shared journey rather than a societal milestone. Her voice softened as she recalled a moment with her dogs, her chosen family of Clyde, Lord Chesterfield and Princess. In their uncomplicated devotion, she discovered lessons about unconditional love, the joy of small routines, the laughter that bubbled from simple pleasures. She spoke of dawn walks on quiet paths, the solace in their unwavering presence, the healing in their warm, furry embrace. They remind me, she said, that life's richness comes in many forms. A heart capable of love remains limitless, no matter its shape. That sentiment resonated far beyond celebrity fan bases. It echoed in the hearts of anyone who ever found comfort in a pet's companionship or in myriad forms of love that defied convention. Throughout her career, Jennifer had mastered the art of reinvention. From Friends fashion icon to rom-com royalty, from drama queen in Cake to executive producer, she stayed ahead of the curve by remaining true to her inner compass. In each reinvention, she carried an unspoken pledge: refused to be pigeonholed, refused to be silenced, and refused to let anyone define her worth by outdated standards. And in doing so, she charted a map for artists, professionals, and everyday people alike who seek not just to survive change but to thrive in it. Her admission of never having children elevated that map to a new dimension. It became less an excuse for pity than an anthem of empowerment. She demonstrated how owning one's narrative, embracing vulnerability, and asserting personal truth can disrupt entrenched paradigms. No longer a passive subject of media headlines, she reclaimed her story with clarity. And in that reclamation, she invited us all to rethink our assumptions, to ask ourselves, what aspects of our lives have we let others dictate? What stories have we inherited that no longer serve us? And perhaps most crucially, what power lies in our willingness to tell a different tale? She paused, letting the last sentiment hang in the air like the final chord of a song. If Jennifer Aniston's journey has taught us anything, it's that life doesn't bend to our timelines, and true fulfillment can emerge in unexpected places. She spoke of the crossroads where she might have chosen a path defined by tradition, and then pivoted, bravely toward a horizon that honored her deepest truths. In doing so, she illuminated a universal truth: our greatest contributions often bloom from the very uncertainties we fear. As the interview shifted, she reflected on legacy, what it means to leave a mark that transcends box office numbers or magazine covers. She described her hair care line Living Proof as more than a beauty brand. It was an exercise in innovation, a testament to questioning why products remained stagnant for decades. She had partnered with scientists to engineer formulas that listened to real women's needs, rather than chasing fleeting trends. In that collaboration, she found a parallel to her own life: the power of combining expertise and empathy, of crafting solutions born from genuine understanding. From there, she transitioned to Echo Films, her production company founded in Jennifer admitted that stepping behind the camera challenged her in ways acting never had. Producing meant shepherding voices that may have gone unheard. Female directors, writers, stories centered on underrepresented perspectives. She recounted championing a script about caregivers in rural America, a tale far removed from Hollywood glam but rich in human complexity. She pushed to greenlight projects highlighting women of color, calling them stories I wish had existed for me. Through each greenlight and behind-the-scenes negotiation, she leveraged her star power to dismantle gatekeeping, making space for untold narratives. In the waning light of the studio, her tone deepened as she addressed the climate of celebrity culture. We're often boxed into caricatures: rom-com queen, divorcee, always the good friend, she said. But none of us fit neatly into labels. She noted how social media amplified those boxes, compressing real lives into 280-character judgments. Yet she found liberation when she decided to curate her own narrative, posting candid photos with laughter lines, flaws on display, afternoons reading in sweatpants. She realized vulnerability could outweigh perfection, that authenticity resonated more than polished facades. Turning to activism, she spoke of joining Time's Up, lending her voice to campaigns against workplace harassment and advocating for gender parity in Hollywood. She remembered standing on a stage with Tarana Burke, the founder of Me Too, feeling both gratitude and urgency. There was power in solidarity, Jennifer said, in knowing that the stories we once whispered could now roar. She urged viewers to see activism not as a distant cause but as daily choices, calling out injustice in small conversations, supporting businesses led by marginalized founders, and mentoring those climbing uncertain ladders. Midway through the conversation, the host asked her about her relationship with age. Jennifer laughed, a warm, knowing sound. 56 feels different than I imagined, she said. When I was younger, I thought aging meant fading out. Now I know it can be a crescendo, a time when confidence aligns with clarity, when you no longer chase others' applause. She spoke of rituals that honored her maturing body and mind, yoga sequences that centered strength over vanity, meditation practices that quieted the inner critic, and weekend hikes that reminded her of life's vastness beyond studio walls. She then offered advice to aspiring artists and professionals listening at home. Don't wait for permission to pivot, she urged. If you wake up restless or curious, give yourself permission to follow that thread. She recalled a near miss early in her career when she nearly turned down the morning show, fearing it would distract from her film trajectory. But intuition nudged her forward, and the series became one of her most acclaimed works. That leap, she emphasized, wasn't calculated by data or focus groups. It was fueled by a deep knowing that some doors open once, and you must trust yourself to walk through. A hush fell when she addressed mental health. Behind every smile you see in photographs, there have been nights of anxiety, she revealed. She spoke of therapy as a constant, not a crisis intervention, a place where she decompressed expectations, unpeeled old narratives, and cultivated kindness toward the self. She acknowledged the irony that Hollywood, which so often trafficked in illusions, could also empower authenticity when celebrities chose to break silence. By sharing her own routines, journaling prompts, breathwork techniques, regular check-ins with friends, she demystified wellness as an accessible, everyday practice. As the clock neared the interview's end, she circled back to the question that framed the entire conversation: why she never had kids. But instead of dwelling on absence, she reframed it as presence. In every role I've played, in every brand I've built, and in every campaign I've raised my voice for, I've mothered something, she said, her eyes bright with conviction. I've nurtured ideas, protected stories, and mentored young women finding their footing. I've tended those projects with the same devotion I once imagined in a nursery, and believe me, I feel that love in full. Her final words resonated like a benediction. We don't have to live by scripts written for us. We get to co-author our stories, weaving chapters of loss, reinvention, and triumph. If you've ever felt defined by what you don't have, know that what you do have, your passions, your courage, your willingness to stand up for your truth, is more than enough. The studio lights softened as she rose, her posture embodying the very blend of resilience and grace she had described. In that moment, the camera captured not just a star, but a woman at peace with her narrative, a living testament to rewriting endings and honoring every version of ourselves. In living rooms across continents, women tuned in to Jennifer's revelation, their own stories of unanswered tests and societal whispers echoing her truth. A teacher in Michigan admitted on social media she'd abandoned adoption plans because she felt judged. A lawyer in Mumbai shared that she'd frozen her eggs, yet resented feeling pressured by family. Overnight, Jennifer's simple declaration became their rallying cry. Comments poured in. Hearing Jen say "I don't owe anyone children" broke my guilt. Finally, someone in the spotlight speaks gravity instead of glamour. These responses underscored how one woman's candor could unravel decades of stigma. Brands and cultural commentators seized the moment. Podcasts queued up panels on reproductive rights and female autonomy. Talk shows invited fertility specialists, psychologists, and life coaches to weigh in. But beyond clinical analysis, the conversation became human. It touched raw nerves, the ache of dashed possibilities, the relief of shedding shame, the optimism in forging new definitions. A hashtag trended within hours. Jen owns her story. It united strangers across borders, generations, and experiences, adolescents posting hopeful affirmations, grandmothers reflecting on choices they once either regretted or embraced. In that digital chorus, words like freedom and self-love surfaced more than infertile or broken. Commercial interests naturally followed. Fertility apps reported record downloads, egg freezing clinics rebranded with empowering mottos. Your life, your timeline. Influencers offered discount codes for therapy sessions and wellness retreats. Yet amid these opportunistic moves, authentic initiatives stood out. Nonprofits sending free self-care kits to fertility patients, online support groups adding extra meeting times, booksellers highlighting memoirs by child-free women. The landscape began to include narratives that had long been sidelined. At industry events, casting agents and producers started asking a new question. How does your life experience enrich the character? Jennifer's story rippled behind the scenes, nudging creators to seek authenticity over archetype. Writers drafted scripts featuring complex women whose fulfillment stemmed from purpose rather than procreation. One major network pilot introduced a protagonist who mentored at-risk youth, her identity shaped by the lives she impacted rather than the cradle she never filled. These creative risks signaled a cultural shift incubating in Jennifer's footsteps. Meanwhile, Jennifer continued laying foundations for the future. She announced scholarships for aspiring female filmmakers through Echo Films, prioritizing stories about non-traditional families. She partnered with humanitarian groups aiding young women in conflict zones, many fleeing forced marriages. She invested in startups developing next-generation contraceptives to improve women's autonomy over their bodies. Each initiative amplified a consistent theme: agency. Whether on-screen or off, she elevated voices muted by institutional or societal pressures. In her private life, she cultivated rituals honoring new definitions of family. Thanksgiving at her Malibu home became an open invitation for colleagues, neighbors, single friends, and childless-by-choice acquaintances. Tables groaned with potluck dishes, while children of friends darted between rooms as honorary guests. Laughter and storytelling replaced any sense of inadequacy. Jennifer would pause by her grandmother's oak table, remarking how expansion of love rarely follows blueprints. In these evenings, she showed that family is built by intention, not biology. Throughout it all, the conventional media lens seldom captured these profound shifts. Yet her inner circle and collaborators knew she was moving beyond healing her own heart. She was cultivating a garden of empathy. A documentary crew filming her day-to-day captured moments of mentorship, script notes, production meetings, candid pep talks about creative risk-taking. They recorded her late-night video calls with women grappling with identity questions. They witnessed her calm strength, the binding force of someone who had weathered storms and then chose to stand as a lighthouse. By the time her interview aired, the public conversation had already begun to shift. Magazines that once cast her as a tragic figure now featured her on covers labeled Woman of the Year and Trailblazer of her time. Editorials praised her for redefining success and refusing to succumb to tabloid narratives. Critics recognized that she had orchestrated one of pop culture's most powerful narrative shifts, reframing motherhood as a choice rather than an obligation. In doing so, she shifted the spotlight onto every person crafting a life on their own terms. After the segment, fans arranged viewing parties in homes, pubs, and online watchrooms. Cooking channels recreated recipes from Jennifer's holiday dinners. Book clubs orbited around memoirs by her friends, dissecting passages that resonated with their own turning points. University sociology classes assigned essays on celebrity confessions as case studies, referencing her story. Even corporate boardrooms debated how her example could inform diversity initiatives, recognizing that empathy-driven leadership fosters healthier workplaces. In these conversations, Jennifer's voice had moved beyond screen and page to shape dialogues in living rooms, classrooms, and offices worldwide.